It's all about sod today. How to measure sod. We're going to cover how to measure regular and irregular yards, how to bid sod. So we're going to cover estimating, and then at the end of the video we're going to go over a few tricks for installing it, things that you may not think of. A lot of you may know a lot of this information, some of you may not, so get ready because here we go. First thing we're going to talk about is the measuring the sod. This is critical to estimating. Let's say that you are going into, and in this case, best case scenario, you have a square yard, okay? It's perfectly square. I don't know how well you can see it, but that's a square. That's the best I can draw. Let's say this yard is 10 by 20 feet, okay? The formula is 10 times 20 to figure out the area gives you 200 square feet, okay? What you do with that is you have to convert this number over to square yards, because that's how sod comes, is in a square yard. So then you take 200 square yards and divide that by 9. So once you've divided it by 9, that gives you 22 square yards. And it's as simple as that. But what happens if you don't come into a perfectly square yard? Let's go through a scenario that you may see. Let's just do a weird shape. I don't care. Let's just do any kind of maybe it's you got a skinny portion of a yard and a fat portion of a yard, and none of it is square. You break it into squares. It's as simple as that. So in this case, in this yard, you may go, look at this is kind of, this irregular shape is kind of a square. And you'd be a little long on some, a little short, but you break it into as close of a square as possible. And let's just call this one 40 by 10, okay? So you break this portion of the yard up, and then you look at this one and go, ah, man, maybe you have to do more than one square up for a portion of a yard. So in this case, you go up like this, over, and down, and then this would be 10 by 30 for this portion of the yard. And then over here, you would go, okay, this portion would be 30 by 30. So now you've taken this odd-shaped yard and you've broken it down into manageable pieces that you can measure. I don't care what shape you got. I don't care what shape you got. Imagine it in boxes. That's what you have to do, and it doesn't have to be perfectly square. Let's go through the formula for these. So in this case, we have 3 sections we have to calculate. We got to go 40 by 10, and then we have to go 30. Okay, so we broke it into 3 sections, 3 quadrants. The first quadrant is 40 by 10. The second quadrant is 30 by 10. So we just multiply 30 times 10. And the third quadrant is 30 by 30. So we have 3 separate quadrants. We're going to add those together. So we have 400 plus 300 is 700 plus 900 gives us a grand spanking total of 1,600 square feet. Square feet don't do us a lot of good. We're going to convert that to square yards. So we simply just take that number and divide by 9. And when we divide by 9, that gives us the quantity of sod in that yard. Let's just do that right now. 1,600 divided by 9. It's 177 square yards of sod. This works on a circle. This works on any shape. If you have a circle, just make a box out of it. The corners stick out a little bit. Who cares? Don't worry about it. It's flipping sod, okay? You take a little bit extra home with you. You throw it in a ditch somewhere that somebody that wants green grass in their ditch. You get your little long, your little short. It doesn't make a bit of difference. Okay, wait. Let me back that up. You don't want to be short. The worst thing you can possibly do is try to go pick up 5 pieces of sod. So make sure you're always a little bit long. you know how to measure it now, but how do you estimate it? Well, this is the first step to estimating accurately. One thing that I want you to do is then you go through and you calculate the cost of your sod. How much does it actually cost you to buy a square yard of sod at your dealer? Around here, I think right now it's $1.50 per square yard. So you know that that is the cost of your material. Okay, so here's something we have to calculate. Let's go through the breakdown of how much this sod is going to cost you to install. The sod costs you $1.50 per square yard. And we want to figure out how much per square yard it actually costs you, the owner, to be installing this sod. But now you've got to remember, it costs you something to get the sod there. If you have to have you have to install 177 square yards of sod, well, guess what? That's quite a few pallets. That's 177 divided by 3, or divided by 75, should be about 3, I'm sorry. 2.36 pallets of sod. Maybe you don't have a truck big enough to do it and you got to have a semi bring it out to you. If they're going to charge you, in this case, $200 to install that sod, okay? What you're going to figure into your formula, let's say they charge you literally $200 just to bring it out, the semi. You take 177 divided by 200. And that's going to give you 88 cents per square yard. Did I do that right? I don't think I did that right. Hold on. You take $200 and divide by how many square yard of sod? I apologize. It costs you $1.12 per square yard. So your purchase price is $1.50. $1.50. It costs you $1.12 to have it delivered. You add those two numbers up. $1.50. $2.62 is your expense right now per square yard. Okay, are you still with me? The final component is actually installing the sod, and you've got to figure out how many square yard can I install per hour. And if it costs me $20 per hour and I can install, let's use a realistic production rate, a labor rate. How many square yards do you think one of your guys can install? Now, I don't know what you guys think, but I figure that one of my guys by himself can put 50 square yards in. On this very specific job, we have 177 square yards. So we take 177 and then we divide it by 50 because that's how many square yard per hour this guy can put in. That comes up to 3.54 hours. So all that sod in this yard should be installed by one guy in 3.54 hours. How much do you pay him an hour? Let's just say it's $20 an hour. So we multiply 3.54 by 20, and that means it's going to cost us $70 to install that sod. Okay? So now we have to convert that, divide the 70 by 177. 40 cents per square yard is what it's costing us. So a total expense should be $3.02. That's your expense. Did you follow me? We have the sod price here. We've calced out the transportation fee, which came out to $1.50 a yard. And then we've also calced in all the other expenses to come up with the actual number that we need to know what it's costing us. Now, are you going to do this job at cost? You're the owner. Put some profit in there. Put 10% on top of it. If you put 10% on this number, you just simply add another 30 cents onto it. So $3.32 a square yard. It's going to vary. Don't go by these formulas, tried and true. Use the idea of how to break it down and apply it to your area. If you're in California, what you're going to be doing for sod jobs is not going to be the same. So this is how I do my sod jobs, and you can just use this as an example for your own projects. I have between 1 and 2 guys that lay the field. That means they're just focusing on sticking sod in this general area. And then I have one guy, what I call a dedicated cutter. And this guy is trimming up all the corners, because you can see this is an irregular shape. We're not actually putting the sod into the square. We're putting the sod to this semi-weird circle thing right here, right? Well, this has to all be cut. Every piece of sod has to be cut, and it takes almost as much time as it takes to lay out the sod. So the fastest way to do it is to get the field started, and then to have a person start cutting the corners so that it's all cut in by the time that the field is all done and everybody can leave at the same time. You don't want a bottleneck. Tools, how do you grade? Let's get into that a little bit. A lot of the times I just use a skid steer with tracks, okay? Maybe you don't have a skid steer with tracks. Don't worry about that. Rubber tired skid steer works as well. And if you don't have that, don't worry about it, okay? I did one of the biggest grading jobs I ever did was for the Shakopee Women's Prison here in Minnesota. And it was acres and acres I had to grade. And I grabbed a four-wheeler and I grabbed a piece of chain link fence. It was actually the gate out of a chain link fence because it had the frame around it then. I threw a couple cement blocks on the top and I cruised around all day long just driving back and forth. Works phenomenally. But let's say you don't have an area that big. What else can you use? You can use a hard rake. The very first thing I say is use a hard rake, but then follow it up with a spring rake, an actual leaf rake. Just like the big old plastic leaf rakes that you probably have lying around. You can buy them for $3 down at Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, your local place. I don't care where you get it. Don't spend a lot of money on it. That spring rake is the same as a chain link fence. It's the same as a grading bar. It's phenomenal. I would have never realized it if my lazy truck driver hadn't been. So let's clarify what I mean by lazy truck driver. Lazy truck driver means he was in search of a better way, plain and simple. And that's how you refine the installation techniques on in every project that you do. So we've covered estimating, we've covered calculating the size, we went over a few tips and tricks on how to install it. Next comes your questions. Whatever you need to know, you can email me at stan@landscapebusinesspro.com. But I'm going to ask a favor from you. If you've enjoyed this video, please share it. Please post it up on the forums, whatever. Help spread the word. The more people that know this stuff, it gets us all on the same page. And what happens is when we're all on the same page, our numbers aren't coming in and out, up and down. We can all start to make a profit. We can all grow together. I love you guys. I hope this has helped. Now go out and get them.